All right, so I misspoke, misheard, misunderstood. It is not officially a spring game. It is a spring finale, whatever the flip that is, which would typically be fine if your athletic director's not out here peddling for more NIL dollar bills with nothing of substance to sell with it.
You are Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma State Cowboys, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Howdy, y'all, and hello, all. Welcome back to Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily stop for all things Cowboy and Cowgirl related. My name is Cody Stovall. I want to thank you kindly for stopping by to make this your first listen. We're available on all of your podcasting platforms, visually as well on YouTube. Find me personally on X at Aldeo State. Today, we're partially brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment matter more, especially with Super Bowl 59 right here. There's not a better way for you to enjoy the playoffs than with FanDuel. New customers can bet $5, and if you win, you get $200 back in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started today. Meanwhile, we get started in the conversation of some semblance of a retraction. I got overly excited when I heard Mike Gundy say that there's going to be a spring finale and it's finally going to be back in the stadium because we're not worrying about the construction going on and things of that nature. I assumed while you're trying to build up the anticipation for the 2025 season that would be part of the equation. So I took it as a logical thing to do when you're trying to build promotion for this upcoming season to have a spring game, especially since we've been deprived of a spring game for the last couple of years. My apologies for misspeaking, mishearing, misunderstanding that it went completely logical with me. So if it's not officially going to be an actual spring game, let me write this Dear John, a.k.a. Dear Chad Weiberg style of letter, because this doesn't make any sense. Let's talk about some of the things that I think that Chad Weiberg, Dr. Casey Schrum, Mike Gundy, whomever, should be looking at if you're trying to get more NIL dollar bills. As our AD recently came out and said, we need more money, we need more this, we need more that. But typically, whenever you're asking for something, there's something of substance behind it to go with it, right? Here's the sales pitch. Well, we're not getting that sales pitch. Matter of fact, as it sits right now, I don't know what the sales pitch is other than the fact that, hey, we overhauled all of the coaches, all of the players, and everything's new. That's a decent start to a good sales pitch. But when you're begging for more money for NIL after the crap fest of a 3-9 season, plus the craziness that went down with the Board of Regents, regardless of what side of the aisle you fall on there, it was still not the greatest of looks. Then you have to factor in the fact that there's a lot of complacency. That's what happened last season, point blank period. And I know Chad Weiberg either has to know it or he's purposely turning a blind eye to it. So if you were trying to get more NIL dollars, what are you sales pitching? Here's some recommendations. Number 5, working up to number 1, would be promote something for the Oregon game. You have one of the biggest games of the year in the non-con, and it happens to be in Eugene, Oregon, after an undefeated season until they're lost in the playoffs. Most of the year, they look like the best team in the country. Dan Lanning still carries a massive name with massive recruiting classes, and they're going to have massive expectations. I firmly believe, and I've seen some people in the comments whenever I said that I feel like we failed the Heisman campaign for Ollie Gordon. People are like, well, why would you put up a Heisman campaign for somebody who only rushed for 880 yards? I was talking about before the season, after he just rushed for 1,700 plus, after he won the Doak Walker Award. To me, as a university, we did not promote him as a potential Heisman guy. I didn't see any ads. I didn't see commercials. I didn't see anything pushing the biggest name that we had at Oklahoma State. So I feel like that was something that we failed at this previous season. We didn't capitalize on having Nick Martin or Colin Oliver. We didn't capitalize on having Ollie Gordon. We didn't capitalize on having DeJon Stribling. There needs to be some semblance of a sales pitch to get the fan base to be more involved. Now, maybe Chad Weiberg has enough big dollar bill donors that don't really care about some of this stuff. So maybe I'm talking about from a fan's perspective. If you want to have another opportunity where fans get to donate $10, $15, $100, $200 to give to these student athletes, you've got to build something up. And to me, if you have a big-time game like Oregon on the horizon, we should be utilizing that to get people excited for Oklahoma State and some players in the program for that game. Secondarily, number 4 on the list, We need to stop pretending, whether it's SID or some of the old figurehead gatekeepers. They need to stop pretending that they're the babysitters for everything. Now, I understand that a lot of these guys have to go through some semblance of media training so they don't trip up and say some things they're not supposed to, or divulge some of the secrets in practice that they don't really want getting out. I understand all of that. But I also understand that this is a new age where marketability is massive. And so this keeping everything in the really tight Stillwater, Oklahoma bubble box, to me, is going to continue to limit us from expanding our fan base. If we ever want to get more national in recognition, we have to be more open. There has to be more accessibility, which to me equals why we're hopping into number 3 here. They go hand in hand. Number 3 is get all of the new coaches and the players more involved in the marketing, whether that's, the Orange Power podcast or just interviews with different radio stations or TV stations or whatever the case may be. The best thing we have going for us right now is the fact that we do have Todd Grantham, we do have Doug Meacham, we do have Jules Montanar and Cap Didi, yet we're not utilizing that. Same could be said about Cooper Bassett. He's a former Cowboy that played under Meacham. Why are we not utilizing that? Why are we not pushing these guys out there even more so they can give their breakdowns of what they're looking for, what they're after, and what they're focusing on in recruiting? I know we've had some 2-second, 3-minute clips here and there, but we need more of that. If you're trying to grow this NIL, we have to know who is at helm, who is the coaches that are going to change everything for us. Now we'll hop into number 2, and this might be the biggest one, an explanation on 2023. Now, it doesn't have to be everything, right? You don't have to give all of the nitty-gritty details as to this player did this, and it caused this friction, and this player decided to transfer, and da-da-da-da. It doesn't have to be the minute details. But just be 100% realistic to some degree with the fan base. The same conversation could be had with Mike Gundy. Mike Gundy can do this. Mike Gundy can get in front of a podium and say, listen, ladies and gentlemen, I failed in 2023 for the same reason I failed in 2022. Or he could say I failed in 2023, but it was nothing like 2022, and here's why. Some of those would go a long way. And again, it doesn't have to be like every little detail, but if he were to just come out broad stroke and say, I trusted the wrong people. I put people in charge of stuff that shouldn't have been in charge. I got a little loosey-goosey. I allowed people to make game plans while other people were conducting the personnel and who was going to start. And it was just too many spider webs going in different directions. And maybe I lost some of the control, or maybe some of the coaches lost control. That stuff would go a long way, but we're not getting it. Like, what would be the justification for keeping Alan Bowman as a starter for so long? If we would get some of that. And here's the deal. A lot of those guys are gone. And I know Mike Gundy obviously doesn't like to fire people, so he's definitely not going to want to throw people under the bus, but that's okay. Maybe he can absorb the accountability portion. Perhaps the whole issue was Casey Dunn, right? Is he going to come out and say that? No, but he could at least say that there was disagreements on who should have been the quarterback, which is why we have a new staff. Something to that effect. Give the fan base something to look forward to by explaining what went wrong and how you know it's not going to happen again. The intricate details don't need to be covered, but the broad strokes need to be accentuated to the fan base. This is why we screwed up. This is why we have a new staff, and this is how I think we're going to be able to fix it. And then finally, you guys guessed it, number 1, if you're trying to build more NIL and get more fan involvement, it's got to be a spring game. This fluffy stuff, fan engagement practice thing that we've been doing the last couple of years, to me, it's not going to build anything. And I don't think that anybody can look at this logically at Chad Weiberg and say, hey, let's just continue to do what we've been doing for the last 15 years and hope that it works out well. Firing the staff is massive. So we need to get Todd Grantham and Doug Meacham out there more to get people more fired up. Because if you're anything like me, like Doug Meacham is growing on me. The more information that I've dug up, the more recruiting I've been able to see. But why isn't that being pushed by Oklahoma State? That, I think, is an issue. If you're trying to build some of this, I'll also add an honorable mention to that is be more engaging with the alumni base, the former Cowboys, the Tatum Bells and the Des Bryants of the world. we want to have those dudes on the sideline as much as physically possible, just like we want to have some of those dudes helping us in the recruiting department as opposed to being standoffish. We've got some massive heavy hitters that have played at Oklahoma State, that have played in the NFL, that are slightly reluctant to kind of pitch backing Oklahoma State. We don't need to know why that is. We just need to know that it's going to change moving forward. So let me know down in the comment section for all you fine folks out here on YouTube. What do you think I missed here? What do you think we could have added to give more marketability, more profitability, more NIL dollars for Oklahoma State after the worst season we've had since basically 1994? Let me know. And you have the opportunity this season. Some of the numbers are already starting to come out, but we don't need to get ahead of ourselves because Super Bowl 59 is here. Grab a brew, grab a bite, and get ready for Super Bowl 59. And make sure that you do so with the best in the betting industry. You already know it's FanDuel. This is one game, biggest game of the year, two teams, so many crazy possibilities, and there's not a better way for you to capitalize than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, who's going to be the MVP, who's going to win the coin toss, who's going to score the next big touchdown, FanDuel makes it easy for you to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the very final whistle. Live betting feature is the bee's knees in the industry, so you can stay involved no matter what's happening on the field. It is super easy for you to navigate, plus knowing that you can place like a $5 bet and potentially win 200 bones back in bonus bets just for watching the Super Bowl and participating. That's the icing on a really big cake. Make sure that you download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started today. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score 200 bones back in bonus bets. Make sure you get that opportunity by going to FanDuel.com. Make sure that you bet with FanDuel because it is the official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 59 and the NFL. All right, so now we get to shift gears here a little bit to the Todd Grantham. Now, as I'd mentioned, we were going to break the hour-long interview down in a couple different segments. I'm glad that we decided to do that because it gave me the ability to go back and re-listen to what Mike Gundy had to say as opposed to spring game, spring finality, tomato. But then we got to roll into Todd Grantham. I have not been bashful on my excitement for Todd Grantham and what he brings to Oklahoma State. Just like I'm very well aware that he's likely going to be a two-year guy, right? If he can get Oklahoma State anywhere near the realm of where Jim Knowles was doing things before he left for Ohio State, then he's going to be able to catapult this job into a head coaching job in college. Could he potentially go back to the NFL? Yes, but we'll talk about that a little bit more here in segment 3. One of the things that really struck me the most with Todd Grantham having conversations with the media in regards to, how this factors into the next season. You have some redshirt freshmen. You have some guys that are holdovers like Justin Kirkland, some of your upperclassmen that clearly want to be a part of the solution. And then you have new guys that are trying to project their career in a significant way by coming to Oklahoma State. And one of the things that caught my eye when he was talking about this was he wants to know, who are your heroes as a player? What hardships have you gone through? Because if you have somebody to look up to and you have somebody to be a guiding light that has shown you the right way to do things, then that's always going to help you because it gives you a foundational block to always go back to. What are your hardships, right? What is your growing situation like? Was high school tumultuous for you? Were you bouncing around? Did you go through foster care? Did you have straight A's? Did you lose a leg? Right? Whatever the case may be, what are the hardships that you've gone through in your life, and how is that going to help you manage the workload in collegiate football? And a lot of that is an all-encompassing way to figure out that if you have all of these, metrics that Todd Grantham is looking for, then you're probably going to have enough heart to be successful. He talked about being bold in your daily play and having the ability to not just focus on the football side of things. There's things outside of the facilities that you need to do to ensure that you're having the capabilities to start. We are going to have to make another roster cut. It is what it is. And so the fact that we're pushing these guys to a wild degree, and now we're trying to understand everybody's why. Because if you have the right heroes, you have go through the right hardships, and you've learned to navigate it, and it gives you enough heart to continue to compete every single day, that is your why. And then you also have to take into consideration, what is the how? You have to be bold enough to build a bond, right? Camaraderie is very important, because if you hold that bond, then the teammates have trust in each other. And if you have trust in the guy next to you, then you have a lot of belief in what you can accomplish. And I think that is important, because if you look directly back to last year, I think that was a large part of the issue, other than some of the complacency, is there was guys on that field that did not trust the guy next to him. There's guys on that field that didn't think the guy next to him should have been the starter. And if you don't think the guy next to you is the guy that should be starting because you see him make same mistakes over and over in practice, and maybe you see a true freshman or a redshirt freshman make mistakes, but they don't make those kind of mistakes, the mistakes that this guy's been making for years, that causes, obviously, a lot of turmoil in the locker room. And I think on the offensive side of the ball, you could see that with Alan Bowman. For anybody that needs to go back and look, there is a massive differentiation between what the team, the offensive line alone, looked like with Alan Bowman in the game, as opposed to Garrett Rangel, and even Milo Ake-Smith to some degree as well. And it's not to say that anybody disliked Alan Bowman, but I think it was very evident that there's a decent number of those guys that did not think that Alan Bowman should have been QB1. Are they still going to go out there and perform? Yes. Are they still going to go play ball and try to put something on film? Yes. But are they going to block for an extra couple seconds longer? No. Are they going to be willing to push themselves just a little bit further, run the route tree one more time, even though you've just ran all the way up and down the field 75 times? No. That's the thing, is you can go back to, did the Cowboys have enough heart this previous season? Absolutely not. There's no way that anybody can defend that we played with enough heart. But then when you take into consideration what Todd Grantham was just saying, that if you have all of the right recipes, then you have a bond. Then you have some togetherness. Then you have trust. Then when you trust the guys next to you, then you have belief that you can go out and accomplish something. If you know that a handful of guys are going to be late to practices, or they're going to be late to film, or they're going to jog it, or they're not going to show up and do everything they're supposed to do in the nutrition room and in the weight room, and then they're going to get rewarded by starting, that is a very demoralizing thing. I don't care who you are. If you're one of the younger guys and you keep getting told, just push yourself, push yourself, push yourself, score high in practice, get good grades, bust your tail and scout team, and if you keep doing this and you keep showing up and showing out, you'll eventually get to play. That did not happen this previous season. So the only way that a lot of the guys that were putting forth the effort, that were grading out pretty well, the only way they got on the field is if there was injuries ahead of them. That was it. It was set in stone. It was laziness. But I think Todd Grantham saying that can allow us all to circle back. And if we apply what Todd's saying now to the last roster, it makes perfect sense. We didn't have a why, and we darn sure didn't have a how. The why was we had 20 returning starters. We had a bunch of seniority that was going to be able to guide the locker room. And I do think that the coaches thought the same thing. So the coaches were like, we don't need to stay a few hours late because we've got 75,000 seniors. The seniors can be the ones to guide the young guys. The seniors can be the ones to help put them in the right spots and tell them what to look for at film and convince them to watch more film in their dorm rooms. But for whatever reason, that did not happen. And I think Todd Grantham hits the nail on the head here. If you have the right recipe for success, you know who your heroes are that have been guiding you most of your life. If you've gone through hardship, maybe not growing up, maybe your hardship started in college. Maybe you were a blue chip style of guy like a J.K. Johnson or a Mordecai McDaniel or even a Jalen Davies. Maybe you were such a heralded recruit that you had offers from Oregon. So you went to Oregon. You had offers from Ohio State. So you went to Ohio State, and it just didn't quite work out. What is their why? Well, their why is this is their opportunity to launch their careers to a level where maybe they were looking down upon. Other people were looking down upon them. And I think the same can be said for the coaches. Todd Grantham's not going to coach forever. Doug Meacham's not going to coach forever. So these dudes know that they can catapult their success at Oklahoma State into a head coaching job in college. The question is, are they going to stay in college? Like, especially Todd Grantham. When you have almost a dozen years of NFL coaching experience and you've been successful several stops along the way, there's got to be that itch to get back into the NFL, correct? Or is it true that maybe college is harder? I can't tell you if college is harder than the NFL because I've never been. But what I can tell you is, regardless of what you're going through in life, you're going to want to make sure that you don't have dollar bills floating out in the ether. This is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was the waiting, wondering, worrying phase of your life where you didn't know if you were going to owe or get some money back. And then after all the waiting, wondering, and worrying, you got to do it a little bit more. Now, Taxes is matching you with a TurboTax expert so you can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives you their tax undivided attention as they work on your return. They'll get you real-time updates on the progress so you can focus on your daily. An expert will find you every deduction physically possible and file every form, every investment, and everything with 100% accuracy. Do not waste this opportunity. You could get money back, and this could be a guarantee. There's no more waiting, wondering, or worrying with taxes. Get the experts now at TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com. Make sure you to go to TurboTax.com/guarantees. TurboTax.com. Get your taxes done so you don't have to stress about it anymore. All right. Now we're shifting gears here before we skedaddle on off of here. One of the last things that Todd Grantham said that I wanted to highlight before we got to his NFL potentially being harder comment was the utilization of leverage, right? So if you know as a player, and this is something that they're looking at from the cerebral side of the field, maybe you can't cover this guy one-on-one. Maybe you're a defensive back and you're going up against a Des Bryant level individual. So if that's the case, you then have to find ways to utilize your strengths to counterbalance his strengths. So if you know that maybe you can't run stride for stride with this guy, but you've got some safety help on the inside, how can I leverage my body, leverage the position, leverage the sideline to get the wide receiver to fall into my trap? Because if I do this the wrong way, he's going to get me. So I have to prevent him from finding my weakness. So I have to exploit his strength and try to get him to take advantage of an opportunity. That is something that I think is another indication as to why some of the guys, when they said, I've learned more in the last week than we did the entire last season, I don't think they're being hyperbolic. I think they're being 100% legitimate when they say that. They're learning technical things. For example, when you're trying to attack a block from an offensive lineman as a linebacker, maybe your hips need to go a certain way so you can get the lineman to take the wrong angle, as opposed to just standing there waiting. These little intricate details, shift your hips 2 inches this way, turn your foot this way when the tight end's coming on this kind of route. Those little things, for whatever reason, we weren't getting last year. We are getting that right now, which is a good reason for us to get a little bit more excited. Are we excited about Todd Grantham? Absolutely. Are we excited about the prospect of him leaving in a couple of years? No, maybe not so much. But the question is, will he go back to the NFL? Or would he like to stay in college? Because he did say that in some aspects, college is a lot harder than the NFL. Obviously, NFL, everybody's going to be very talented. Everybody's going to be really big and fast and strong. And They all hit the weight room like crazy. They all run 4.40s. So finding mismatches in the NFL is a lot more difficult. So it's a little bit more straight up, as you could kind of picture it. As opposed to college, there's a lot of shifts. There's a lot of tempo. He mentioned when the NFL runs tempo, he was like, this is not fast. We call this fast in the NFL, but compared to college, it's nothing. So he did make comments about how there are a lot more plays. There's a lot more deception in collegiate game because there's just a lot more advantages that you can exploit. Unlike in the NFL, where everybody's going to be, pretty evenly talented, you can't find as many of those exploitable areas as you can in college. So college comes with more shifts, more audibles, bigger playbooks, more understanding of, conceptually what you're supposed to do in the route trees against different coverages. Whenever you get to the NFL, it's like, refining of your craft. You are a legitimate professional. So we're not going to ask you to do a bunch of crazy stuff. We're going to ask you to do something pretty simplistic like a professional. So that's the differentiation. And Todd Grantham talked about how the college game, because there's a lot more eye candy, there's a lot more plays, there's a lot more, time conservation aspects that you have to pay attention to. The rotating in of guys is something you have to pay attention to a lot more in college. If this is true, then we're about to be the beneficiaries of that. Not to mention, Todd Grantham talked about, growing up under the legendary coaching of Frank Beamer. Then he got to coach under Mark Richt, which I would say is very like Mike Gundy's career at Oklahoma State, right? Winning 9, 10, 11 games is the expectation, but he didn't have any SEC titles, or maybe he only had one. But I feel like Mark Richt and Mike Gundy do have a decent amount of similarities in their careers. Then he talked about Nick Saban. And he talked about how he learned so much from Nick Saban. And that was honestly his most difficult transition from any of the colleges, NFL, back and forth, whatever it was, because of the little bitty intricate details. And he talked about how Nick Saban does everything like an NFL draft board. You have guys that you would project in the first round, guys that you would project in the second, third rounds, guys that you would project as a bubble guy that might not make the roster, And bringing that to Oklahoma State, I think, is going to be absolutely massive. I think we're seeing some of that already paying off in the recruiting realm, which doesn't matter until you start getting commitments and letters of intent. Oh, wait, that doesn't matter anymore either, because you can commit, you can sign a letter of intent, or you can sign an NIL deal that's supposed to be the same thing as a letter of intent, and then you can just willy-nilly get out of it whenever you want. The NCAA... oh, man. I guess we don't have time for that rant again. It is what it is. We are where we are. Anywho, that's all we're going to have for this one right here. As always, I love you. God bless. Go Pokes. Thank you for tuning in to make this your first listen here on Locked On Oklahoma State. You could be anywhere, so happy you choose to be here. YouTube and people out there, hit the like, comment, share, subscribe. My podcasting people out there, you're the bricks, the bread, the butter, the fountain, the fondue, the funny stuff, the funky stuff. You are all of it. Do what you do. Hit the stars. Leave a review. I appreciate you. All righty, y'all. Later, taters.